With this, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'd like to pass the floor back, I think, to Mr. Pinkepank. Mr. Evan, thank you very much. And I think we are receiving questions which probably can go directly to you, Marine Mol from Copenhagen in Denmark. She asks in English, and maybe we can answer.
All contributors call ChemCycling complementary to mechanical recycling or cycling. Can the technology in fact address the waste fractions that are not currently recycled from household waste? Und zweite Frage gleich anschließend, how can we as city and waste managers support and develop this technology so it can solve the gap between collected for recycling and actually recycled? Ich könnte mir vorstellen, dass Raimondes, Herr Evan.
Okay, so how could our technologies close the gap, and what can waste and city waste managers contribute to make sure that the ChemCycling development is being continued?
Well, that's a very good question, and we are asking it ourselves every day. And if we look at mechanical recycling, and if we want to expand it, which we want, there is further steps in order to lead to a 100% recycling step. But there is always going to be a residue, and this residue will always have to be included in our calculation. So we won't get around incineration plants, but the share of the recyclable products will be increased with chemical recycling. I think I have a question for you, Professor Stapf, coming from Piet Koels from Belgium. And it is asked in English. You can answer in English or German.
Presentation, the costing CED at the last slide of KIT. At what scale was the chemical recycling considered? The size that we see it today, or the ideal size envisioned in the future? Ich wiederhole die Frage noch mal gerne, Herr Stapf, weil ich denke mal, das wäre wohl für Sie. Thanks for the presentation. The costing CED in the last slide.
Which share of recycling can be mechanical and which can be chemical? Well, first of all, let me say that we talked about lightweight packaging, the standard thermoplastic materials, and here you can see the more we recycle mechanically, the better. Chemical recycling is not so much worse in terms of indicators and should deal with the rest. So here, there's always the appeal to go on mechanically recycling, but there is the problem that the products of mechanical recycling don't have the quality in order to fulfill all expectations. But with other plastic shares, which we have not observed, chemical recycling has to play a larger role because many plastics cannot be sorted. And I hope that this was the answer for the question. So for LWPs, you have 20 to 40%, which is mechanical recycled, the rest chemical. And in total, we have recycling rates of 60 to 70%. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to allow for as many questions as possible in the last 10 minutes. And I think there is a question to the BASF colleagues.
Concept, the benefit of recycled content are probably allocated to one product. If there are several byproducts within the same process, how can transparency in the LCA be assured, especially for further recycling processes? Ich glaube, Christian, das wäre was für dich.
Yeah, I mean, for LCA, especially when you apply the mass balance approach, you should always say how you have done that. Yeah, I mean, we in our LCA study, we have applied an established BASF approach already, where we also co-authored a scientific publication on the mass balance approach, how we do that in LCA exactly. I mean, and that should be reflected. In general, I would say we always at BASF had has always certified products. Yeah, so we let a third-party auditor audit our mass balance approach. That this auditor really ensures that the amount of feedstocks, what circular feedstock what we buy, we allocate correctly to the right output. And this balance is correct. Yeah? So this is a combined answer. So first, transparency in LCA, and second is third-party certification on a mass balance approach in general, which is independent from LCA.
Okay, vielen Dank. Ich gucke noch mal.
I'll look at the questions and which we can use particularly. It is many questions on subjects that we don't want to focus on today. But there's one question coming towards the BASF.
That you have to test to ensure your ChemCycled package is... das ist wahrscheinlich eher an Kjetil. Kjetil, maybe a question to you. What are the characteristics that you have to test to ensure that your ChemCycled package is suitable for food packaging? How do you define those? Oder Erik Bautz vielleicht. Erik, maybe that's a question for Erik. Erik, did you get it? And can you hear us? Erik, I repeat the question.
I can hear you.
Okay, have you got the question?
You can repeat it to make sure I understood it correctly. But let me start by saying that chemical recycled products have the same qualities as products. And therefore, it can be used exactly in the same way in our production processes as virgin materials. And therefore, also, the end result, the film made out of these materials, is exactly the same as the one based on virgin materials. And therefore, it's an ideal solution from a food packaging point of view. Please repeat the question. Maybe I did not cover all the elements.
Okay, I try to get the question again. What are the characteristics that you have to test to ensure your ChemCycled package is suitable for food packaging? How do you define those? So the testing for food packaging and the criteria for that.
Yeah, it goes too long to list all the criteria for food packaging testing. But again, we do not differentiate our standards for virgin material-based packaging or chemical recycled packaging. It's exactly the same standards, and that's how we test the both variants, the two product alternatives.
Okay. So what about the next questions? And okay. So maybe the regie should give me some indications. Okay. Maybe, yeah, a question to Lars, I guess. I mean, that is basically back to BASF von Simon Neudeck in Germany, obviously. Of pyrolysis oil and consequently a buyer of waste streams. Would that be a tricky one? Should I repeat it?
No, I think I got the question. I think in this circular value chain that we showed before and that we all have in our heads, everybody should do what they do best. And I think what BASF does best is take raw materials and turn them into high-value products and do so sustainably. So I think we will keep our focus on running our Verbund, as we call it, our integration of production in the current setup and sourcing the pyrolysis oil from those companies that we think do that best. Of course, as was indicated, and Christian, you mentioned that, there is still a lot of potential to develop that technology, and that's something that we would all benefit from. So we participate in that. We continue to invest to basically get to a better technology, better pyrolysis oil, better supply. So we are active there, but I don't see us long-term as producing pyrolysis oil.
Okay, great. I guess there's another question, Christian, for you again about the mass balance approach that came from Damien Le Bonnois from Italy. Hello, Christian. About your mass balance approach, do you consider the mass yield of steam cracker? Indeed, 1 ton of pyrolysis oil will will not lead to 1 ton of recycled plastics as a substantial part of the cracked oil will be burned as off gases. Thanks a lot. Repeating?
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay.
I mean, it's clearly described already by the third-party certification schemes, how they mention it. Yeah, that's not a BASF approach. It's an approach independently from BASF, how the industry is applying those application standards like ICC Plus or RSB. Yeah, and there the mass balance, and they have a lot of experience also in the biofuel sector, which is politically accepted by the European Commission. And there it clearly says that you exclude the energy part of that. Yeah, so you focus on the feedstock part, which is going into materials. Yeah, and therefore you apply the conversion factor. Yeah, and this is also how BASF is applying that. So we are applying there for a certification scheme, which is developed by the members of those certification schemes. And it's also a multi-stakeholder approach. There are also NGOs sitting together with industry developing those standards.
Okay, thanks a lot. Just looking a little bit to the other questions. I mean, there's a simple question, I guess, that's again to Eric Bautz from Südberg. A little bit comparable to the last question, simple one. Why can mechanically recycled plastic not be reused in food containers? What is the reasoning? So why can mechanically recycled plastic not be reused in food containers? What is the reasoning? Eric, maybe to you.
Yeah, very simple answer. Food safety laws throughout the whole world, in Germany, in every continent. You only are allowed to use virgin plastics for food contact to avoid any form of contamination. And again, chemical recycled plastics do have the same characteristics and the same qualities as virgin materials, and that's why they can be used in food packaging. Mechanical recycled materials do not have that kind of properties.
Okay, thanks. So maybe I've watched time. Yeah, maybe if we have time for another 1 or 2 questions. And this question's from Isabel Jenny, Switzerland, is about maybe to Simon. Simon, maybe you are still here with us. Isabel asked the question, how is chemical recycling included in the circular footprint formula from the product environmental footprint? Do you get the question? How is chemical recycling included in the CFF, circular footprint formula, from the PEF, product environmental footprint? Simon, can you elaborate on that?
Well, with regard to the study that we're talking about, it's been incorporated by taking into account the lower quality output of mechanical recycling, and they've put a factor of 0.5 on that to achieve that. But obviously the study authors could go into more detail about exactly the assumptions around that, but that's how it's been used in this particular study.
Okay, thanks. Maybe a last question we can have. Maybe, I guess, Professor Stapf, maybe that could be something for you, from Magali Paluau from France. Okay, that I pronounce obviously wrong. What about the comparison, considering that waste plastics are valorized into cement kilns, high energy efficiency and substitutions to lignite coal or petroleum coke, for example? Did you get it, Professor Stapf? Should I repeat?
No.
Translation takes a time. Sure.
Okay, I understand. How about the alternative of the energetic use of plastics instead of chemical recycling, for example, in the cement kilns? So the high energy plastics are not so much used in incineration. So in many countries, they are used for the landfills. There's no incineration capacities for that. So here we're talking not so much about extracting material from some high temperature processes like cement. So cement compared to coal incineration is something which we'll stick to, which we'll keep. So here it has to be energetically controlled. And in the next decades, there will obviously be alternatives to the classical thermal incineration as an energy value, but we cannot make this comparison. So high energy plastic wastes energetically and thermodynamically are much too valuable to just incinerate them. There are other substances that can be used rather than that. And they can also not be compared to extracting something from the cement. So if you talk about 11 million tons until 2030 additional recycling capacity for Europe, which we need, and in order to keep the recycling rates, then nothing actually is extracted or taken away from the cement incineration. We haven't made this comparison. We just looked at the normal energy mix and the incineration of residues. I hope that this answers the question.
Ich hoffe auch, und ich weiß nicht, ob wir alle Fragen beantworten können. Ich möchte nur gerne
and I don't know whether we can answer all the questions, but I want to be punctual. We all stayed in the forum for a long time, so let's say thank you to Professor Stapf and Mr. Efan of Remondis for the last two inputs. Thank you, Mr. Kissau and Mr. Krüder, for all your answers.